Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. This is the show where I take a look at every classic Doctor Who story, plus a bunch of Big Finish and audio dramas, one episode a day, 7 days a week. And today, on the 9th of July, 2018, we are beginning the final Jon Pertwee audio drama, aired in 1997, shortly after Pertwee's death, entitled The Ghosts of N-Space, starting with part 1. And this is also, I believe, the final story to be written by Barry Letts. Barry Letts, of course, at least the final story credited to Barry Letts on television. I don't. This is a story where, the Doctor, is played by Jon Pertwee. Again, this was very, very close to his death, and I'm going to come out and say it. Jon Pertwee is excellent. He is just excellent as the third Doctor in this story. He does an amazing job recapturing the youth and the magic of his younger days and his earlier portrayal of the character, as well as just generally being a good a good performer. He doesn't. It's just he's really just doing his all, and really giving us quite a lot of fun stuff to listen to. Oddly enough, on this first episode of The Ghosts of N-Space, much like the first episode of The Paradise of Death, the other Barry Letts penned radio serial, you have, it starts with the Doctor, the Doctor's brilliant. He's doing some sort of an experiment with the TARDIS, which, is totally fine. Something that, you would think that, it's something that, happens quite a bit. It's one of those things where, he's still always tinkering. We're back at Earth past death to the Daleks. And what we get is, the Brigadier is actually in Sicily. Turns out his cousin, called Uncle Mario, is the winner, owns an island, and is having some gangster troubles. We don't really get some gangster troubles. There's a gangster called Maximilian, something that begins with a V. I don't quite remember his name, but it's enough that he was a gangster with a robotic arm. Weirdly enough, for a story that takes place in the middle of the 1970s, of course, because this is this has Tom Baker, this has Jon Pertwee's Doctor, and you know what? It's one of those things where you get this really interesting sort of idea. You have this gangster, not much happens, but the Brigadier's uncle has a mansion that is, haunted by a woman in white, one of the titular ghosts from N-Space. Also, for whatever reason, Sarah Jane and, this audio returns us to Jeremy Fitzoliver, one of the most annoying characters of Doctor Who, especially in this. Seriously, I really do not like Jeremy as a character. He doesn't exactly have the best track record as a character. He's kind of a complete idiot overall. Like he's not very intelligent. Sarah Jane is pretty much just there to tolerate him, and he's there pretty much for Sarah Jane actually just to have someone to talk to, and so it's not just I'm talking to a camera the whole time. I'm talking to the audience the whole time. But you have Sarah Jane and Jeremy. They have no right to be in this story, but, because, it just for whatever reason they had Liz Sladen, she invades on the Brigadier's, sort of vacation with with his Uncle Mario, who he promised to help. So he calls the Doctor in because, he's the Brigadier, and by this point he is kind of a useless character, which is a real shame because the Brigadier has had just a lot of falling moments. This is probably him at his lowest, at his weakest character-wise. Like, he can't do anything without the Doctor. Something that really shouldn't be difficult, because, well, it's the Doctor. It's not someone, who, who can't. Um, it's one of those, you'd think that, they'd have the full story, but no, they really don't. But what's nice enough is that, you have the interesting enough characters. The Brigadier's Uncle Mario is kind of this out loud Italian man who's just like crazy, a stereotypical accent, the whole shebang. Nothing too actually Italian, but he's fun enough. Like, he's got he's got a decent part. You get some really creepy stuff with the ghosts. Sarah Jane, essentially the cliffhanger is her falling off of a cliff, because, well, it's like, hey, she gets trapped by this ghost, and, well, the idea is that there's this alternate dimension where it's like the negative, which is called null space. I don't quite know if I like the fact that Doctor Who is trying to tackle that sort of thing. That's sort of, it's an alternate dimension where like ghosts are. There are also tentacle monster type things, as seen just at the very end of the story episode. Which is weird. Like, why are we doing tentacle monsters? That's not a normal Doctor Who thing. Like, that's gonna be weird to get through. But yeah, we have a decent start to the story. John Pertwee and Liz Sladen are good. Nick Courtney is great. The guy that plays Jeremy Fitzoliver is all right, but he's still an annoying character. But we have an intriguing start. We have a gangster plot, and a ghost plot. Though neither gets very far, and neither has their purpose explained. But it's a start. So I'm going to give The Ghosts of N Space Part 1 a 7 out of 10. Alright, it is the 10th of July 2018, and I just finished listening to Part 2 of The Ghosts of N Space. And Part 2 of The Ghosts of N Space is, well, it's a bit of an odd one, because like with the Paradise of Death, there isn't a complete redo of Part 1. It really is just it doesn't really give us the cliffhanger. It's sort of like, no, we we're doing the story as it is. We aren't it's sort of, that, hey, it's sort of like, hey, this whole the whole you have just this whole gangster plot line there, really, that was really just meant to get the Doctor and Sarah Jane and the Brigadier and Jeremy to Sicily, where they're needed. But there are some interesting things. This episode is very much like, let's try to find all the exposition. You have Sarah Jane and Jeremy exploring the library to figure out why the N-form ghosts are there, and it turns out there's always been sort of this woman in white, and sort of the idea is that, hey, if we go, if we go back, we could actually and maybe even see what's going on. So that's sort of where the Doctor and Sarah Jane's plotline takes them into the past, into 1818, where they're the Doctor. Well, something that's rather interesting is that you have the Doctor and Sarah Jane. They land near the sea. They're like, all right, Sarah Jane, Sarah, you have these nice clothes on. We're getting into the sea and acting like we're shipwrecked, basically, so we can basically be helped out. So that's something, uh, kind of interesting, uh, you know, that the story really does, is that it decides to be like, yeah, we're going into the past already, and that's, and of course that leaves the cliffhanger where Sarah Jane gets crushed by a rock, something that I think is executed decently. It's a decent cliffhanger, um, and it's one of those things. It's an episode that that really does a good job of things. Um, uh, um, we also have, what's interesting is that we have this Baron who is in the present day, also played by the same actor um, who is in the past. You have some interesting people. You have some interesting parts. You have, oddly enough, Sandra Dickinson from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the TV version, who played Trillian, um, playing the gangster's sort of girlfriend Maggie, and that's an interesting little plotline, even if it goes nowhere. You also have Stephen Thorne playing the gangster, and he is um, he is great as the story, but it doesn't really continue very well. It does quite a few problems with that. And it doesn't really, which basically doesn't continue the plot. We don't have too much plot explanation, which is where this episode really falls. But I've been enjoying it. It's a very enjoyable episode. So I'm going to give The Ghost of End Space Part 2 another 7 out of 10. All right, it is the 11th of July, 2018, and I just finished listening to Part 3 of The Ghosts of End Space. And you know what? Part 3 of The Ghosts of End Space, this story is just getting weirder by the minute, and that's really all I can say. Okay, so full disclosure, this is the first time I've listened to the actual audio. I've read the novelized version of this story, written by Barry Letts, and published, oddly enough, before the story came out. And I'm sorry, it's just friggin' weird. Like, this is a weird-ass story. I mean, I didn't really like the novel, but this episode, we, well, we have, the... well... well... Let's be honest, everything doesn't... It's one of those ones where sense isn't exactly made, so... The woman that Sarah Jane makes friends with, Louisa, is revealed basically to be the whole ghost. She's the ghost because, well, she kind of has to be. The ghost died, so she's gonna die. Except we don't actually we don't actually see we don't really see anything like about Louisa dying or anything. It was just like, no, she's the lady in white, and the doctor even just shrugged off as, yeah, I kind of knew that. You knew it too. Like, it was kind of obvious, wasn't it? Like, seriously, it's one of those things that it's like, okay, yeah, that it's one of those things that just it happens, which is fine. But you go on just to see like the weirdness of having the story well, we have the story take us further back to, uh, well, uh, to basically to back further, where Max Vilmia, who is sort of immortal, like he's like the same gangster in the present, is this Max Vilmio guy in the past. Like it's all um you know, it's one of those things where you're just like, wait, we're still doing this. um it's still going on with the whole we're doing the story, like um it's it's weird. It's like we're doing the whole everything um everything is uh um everything is like he's an alchemist, and the doctor sort of calls him out on that. Also, he sends his girlfriend in to ask about like the 21st of May, which is apparently important for some reason that, well, doesn't quite get explained. Like it's like, oh yeah, no, um, we're doing, we're, um, we're doing, this whole, um, you sort of you have the whole story being just going around and having the Doctor and company get there, even if like it doesn't exactly lead to anything. Basically, the episode is weird. The few things that is just really getting you through the episode and making it be good are the performances. Like Sandra Dickinson is hilarious as the gangster's girlfriend. Her name is Maggie. She's really really funny. She does a good job um, as the character, even if even if there really isn't much to be done about it. Like again, not much happens. We get more pieces of the puzzle, and we're just jumping from location to location. And that's sort of a problem, is that we aren't staying in one place long enough to really get a sense of the characters. It's one of the things where it's like, we need to jump from here, now we need to jump here, we need to get to this, now we're in this time. So yeah, you don't get a sense that everything is a full story. It's just that we're just jumping so much. So I'm going to give The Ghost of N Space Part 3 a 6 out of 10. Just hopefully it'll calm down a little. Alright, it's the 11th of July 2018, and I just finished listening to Part 4 of The Ghosts of N Space. Part 4 opens interestingly. Interestingly enough, with again, instead of a reprise of the cliffhanger, we just open on the next scene with Jeremy and Maggie in the boat, lost on the water because they run out of gas. In a genuinely comedic enough scene, even if, well, let's be honest, even if it's, not the best scene overall, like, the story still seems to have a lot of flaws with it, mainly in the fact that it's one of those ones where it's like, hey, we are doing a a it's one of those little stories where things you have this nice little moment where we really get a side character who has quite an interesting past. Her father was rather abusive. Gives him a very very serious past, yes, but a very good past. And well, when he was beating up on her little siblings, he was drunk, because he was a drunk, of course, because that is one of those things, you know, it's one of those things where you have uh, the feelings um, of everything. It's one of those things where you have um, the story going on with the poor girl, and she does have a very compelling thing. She stood up for herself and she killed her father, who was abusive, who obviously wasn't a good person. But you also, well, let's be honest, this episode is one where, and I'm kind of sorry, but well, it doesn't really advance much, except the fact that Maximilian in the past is also Maximilian in the present, because they have the same name. Bum, bum, bum. One of those little tricks of the trade that Erlings, and also Maximilian worships the devil and is planning something to become immortal on the 21st. And, well, the cliffhanger, the cliffhanger is that he opens End Space, sort of the idea is that he can't get into End Space because the barrier closes, whilst he is supposed to be going through. Like, it's a very weird sort of way of the Doctor defeats the villain at the end of part 4. Seriously, it's like, we should be done here. This isn't... I don't quite know where they're going with this. I mean, he obviously still exists in the present, so maybe that's what they're gonna do. But I don't think it's done very well because of this. Like, it's like, oh, we totally have this idea of what we're doing, so that you really should, listen to what we're doing, even though we aren't actually telling you where we're going with this and what the actual plan is in the end. Like, they're really... It's really just a, hey, this is kind of interesting, maybe you could see it, maybe you could see it done, as a completed story, not necessarily as the full, as the full story, but just as this is sort of where we're going with this, and I think I enjoy it. I enjoy it quite a lot, actually. It's done well. But it doesn't sort of grab you like it should. It's one of those ones where, it's one of those ones where you don't see the story totally, completely as a big and bombastic ending. It's just like you sort of try to see where it is. And we still have 2 episodes to go, so I'm going to give The Ghost of End Space Part 4 a 5 out of 10. Alright, it is the 12th of July, 2018, and I just finished listening to Part 5 of The Ghost of End Space. And Part 5 of The Ghost of End Space actually begins with one of this story's greatest falls, is that we are in Episode 5. And we pulled the whole, yeah, the Doctor actually lost. Nothing's actually changed, because in the book that Sarah Jane found back in one of the earlier episodes, I believe it was part 1 or 2 or 3, they mentioned a great magician, and that great magician is, of course, the Third Doctor, as he's described. And that's just not good writing. You don't... Barry Letts should know this. I know... It's weird. It's like they wanted to split this up as 6 episodes into a 4 and a 2-parter. And that's sometimes done very well. But not very well when the cliffhanger of episode 4 isn't really a cliffhanger. It makes you think, oh, everything's fine. Because that's what it does. The cliffhanger is literally the villain is defeated. Comparing to some who say, I know this is much later, and I haven't actually covered this story yet. The effective cliffhanger of episode 4 of the Invasion of Time, where it's revealed that actually it was a different villain this whole time. It was, in that case, the Centaurans, again, for the end of episode 4, which leads into part 5 much more smoothly, or in quite a few, actually, of the 6-parters that we will see coming up throughout the Tom Baker era, where the end of part 4, something in the game changes. This wanted to be we're changing the game in a snap, without actually changing the game in a snap. It was just like, we think we've got the game changed, when in actuality, the game hasn't changed. It's just stayed the same, and the Doctor is now responsible for having to find his way to fix everything, wrap everything up nicely in a little bow without actually having wrapped everything up nicely into said little bow. And you know what? That's a problem with part 5, is that it just doesn't do that. We are in present day pretty much now. You have suddenly a siege going on. Again, a lot of this, it seems that things are just jumping ahead. We're jumping around without any real care or worry any care or worry for anything, to be done well. It's just like, yeah, we're gonna jump ahead now, and in jumping ahead, we are continuing the story, yes, and we're also we're gonna make you think we know where we're going, but it feels like Barry Letts really didn't have an idea where he wanted to end up. So he was just like, well, now let's just start throwing everything in the kitchen sink right back at the characters, and not actually give the characters a complete conclusion. Like, the Brigadier is being all commanding, and his uncle, who is a really bad comedy character, like, the Brigadier's uncle is one of the most annoying characters of Doctor Who history, because he is literally just, oh, aren't I a crazy Italian? Seriously, stop it, Barry Letts. It's embarrassingly bad. It's not really a good character. It's like, here is my funny voice, and I have a gun, even though I don't actually shoot it. It's just a bad episode. The story started off pretty decently, but now we've gone to just this ending where it's like, oh, this is what we're doing now because we enjoyed it. We had our fun. Now let's go and do this whole new thing. So yeah, it's not a very solid episode. It's not an episode that I can really even recommend you listen to. I'm going to give The Ghost of N Space Part 5 a 4 out of 10. Alright, it is the 13th of July, 2018, and I just finished listening to the final episode, Part 6 of The Ghosts of N Space. And let's talk for a minute just on why The Ghosts of N Space Part 6 is not only the weakest, it's not really the weakest, it doesn't, why The Ghost of N Space Part 6 doesn't work as a story, mainly because Part 5 was so weak. This is working because the sins of the father, at least, well, sins of a father, of course, it's one of those stories where you think you have it made, but very sadly you don't. It works on a level of, we're attempting to do something interesting, and I admire it for that. It has some really decent scenes. Sarah Jane gets some great stuff to do. Stephen Thorne gets to actually unleash his madness, sort of his actual, the big voice that he's known for using, and that's amazing to listen to. But again, we should have finished 2 episodes ago. There's no reason for me to keep listening, and even enjoy what I'm listening to. You don't. That's the problem with the story, is that I'm not having fun listening to it, and neither will you. It's by the end of the story. It has some good stuff. John Pertwee is great. The whole Will subplot, like, oh, who's gonna get the Brigadier's Uncle Mario's estate when he's gone? I'm sorry, that subplot doesn't make much sense to me. It's just sort of like, yes, we threw in a subplot because we thought it sounded fun. Which, I'm sorry, it really didn't sound very fun. It was very much a, we want to try something, we tried it, it didn't work, we needed a way to get the story going. And, that's really a shame, because this story could have been great if it just had maybe a couple more drafts, and if it was 2 episodes shorter, or if maybe they could have actually looked back at some older Pertwee serials and figured out what made that magic work, the magic of John Pertwee work for those stories, because they don't work for these stories. They're just too much of a, we think we're doing something. It's the sort of, look at how clever we are, gambit, not the, look at how much of a good story we're telling, or how well we're creating an image in your mind. We're just trying to be clever and trying to give us a completed, we're trying to essentially give you something to latch on to and enjoy, while we fluff things up and have the story still going, which is, again, it's quite a shame. It's one of those things where you really could have had much better. I'm going to give The Ghost of N Space Part 6 another 4 out of 10. And we add up all 6 episodes to give The Ghost of N Space a final score of 5.5 out of 10. Thank everybody for watching this installment of the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. And next time we'll be taking a look at our penultimate John Pertwee serial with The Monster of PELADON.